Recording. And welcome again. For those that don't know me, my name is Francisca Rose. I'm the Public Involvement Coordinator with the Neighborhood and Public Involvement Program. And first off, I just want to thank you for being here tonight and giving up your evening to learn how to take minutes with us. So our goal for tonight's training is to equip you with the knowledge you need to feel confident taking minutes at your meetings. We know it can be overwhelming. I too was once the recorder for BCCI back when I served from 2010 to 2012. So I definitely understand the intimidation factor, but our seasoned city recorder will go over all of the tips, tricks, do's, don'ts, and answer any questions you may have. So let me just take a moment to introduce our trainer for tonight, our city recorder, Cathy Jansen. Cathy Jansen has worked in city government for over 50 years. She started in Arroyo Grande, California at 16 and worked her way up to deputy city recorder and then city recorder through college. She has served as either a city recorder or deputy city recorder, all for 11 years each for the cities of Arroyo Grande, and Mountain View, California, and Forest Grove. And she's been with the city of Beaverton for 19 years now. As the Beaverton City Recorder, she manages and coordinates scheduling for all city council meetings, works with the mayor, department heads, and staff to coordinate, prepare, and proof all agenda bills, ordinances, and resolutions, manages the processing and distribution of all city council meeting materials, processes all post-meeting documents, including minutes, resolutions, agreements, and contracts, archives all above referenced documents into our electronic record management system, works with the city's legal staff in drafting code changes, ordinances, and more, and manages the city's Granica system, the live streaming video of council meetings and planning commission meetings, and their associated documents on the web. Phew! Needless to say, Cathy Jansen is extremely knowledgeable and highly proficient at capturing the must-have details to meet public meeting law requirements. We can't thank her enough for sharing her wisdom and experience with you all this evening. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Cathy. And I have the PowerPoint all ready to go, so let me know when you want me to start screen sharing.
Okay. Well, it's nice to see you all here. It has definitely been a different world we've been living in this past year, and we've all learned new ways to accommodate public involvement. You're hearing me from the phone tonight because of a technical difficulty. We were working fine when we started testing, and then all of a sudden it didn't work anymore. So I hope that you can all hear me. Please let me know if you can't. And I'll be glad to repeat any comments or answer your questions. I'm going to start with a brief introduction of what it's like out in the world of city recorders right now. It is a talent that is highly sought after, but fewer and fewer people are going after government jobs nowadays. The opportunities are much wider, and so our industry is looking at ways to make things easier to do for people. Records keeping laws and minutes keeping laws are different from every state and from every city and county you live in. And in Oregon, we're very much into transparent government, which affects how we do our records a great deal. There are two types of groups in Oregon who are recording minutes. The first group is not what we will be dealing with tonight, but they are the larger groups like your city councils, your planning commissions, and your traffic commissions, budget committees, who are required by law to take very detailed minutes of what goes on. But other groups like boards and commissions that are advisory in nature, NACs, HOAs, staff committees, you have the flexibility to use more summarized minutes, more note-taking. And so it's not near as scary a job as people seem to think it is. And so that's why we're here today, to make life a lot easier for all of you. Let's go ahead and start with the slides, Francisca, and thank you for your help on this.
right, let me just pull that up here. Now I appear to be having technical difficulties. Give me just a second. I can't pull up
Okay.
the PowerPoint slides. Let me reopen them again.
I have to say kudos to Francisca because she is our Zoom wizard. When this all started a year ago, we weren't using Zoom for our public meetings and people had to learn fast. And one of those people was Francisca, and she got to be such an expert that she then became the teacher for the rest of the city. So she's a star in my book.
Thank you.
She is just great. Okay, so tonight we're going to cover, like I said, minutes and taking the minutes for groups like advisory groups that you sit on, your CCI, your library board, your diversity advisory board, and all of the others that we have out there, your NACs, your staff committees, you know, any social committees that you sit on. This is the easiest way to do minutes. And what benefits your board the best. The first thing I want to say is that minutes are a record of what was done at a meeting. And the reason we take that record is so that the meeting participants and anyone who was absent and the public know what you did. It's the story of your committee. It's information that not only do you need to track what you are doing, but it also impacts outside agencies that are affected by any kind of the decisions or actions that you are doing. And it tracks the tasks you need to do and the timelines that are assigned to staff and to other members. However, minutes are not a minute by minute recording of what happened or a record of who said what. And I really like to stress that point to people. Next slide. Your minutes form, as I explained earlier, it depends on the type of board and committee that you sit on. And we are concentrating on the advisory boards. The tracking style is shorter, it's to the point, and it's mainly to track actions, decisions, directions that are given, timelines, the critical points and decisions that are made at the meeting. Next slide. I find for the committees that I have served on that clear, short is the best. When you're thinking of doing minutes, it's cost effective if they're short and clear, because the work that you are doing takes time away from your life. And the more efficient you can be doing these minutes, then the more time you have to devote to other projects that your committee is doing. It also avoids burnout. What often can happen is that committees will lose members because they're tired of doing detailed minutes, or they can't get anyone else to do it. And if you make this task easy, then it's easier to share the responsibility. And it's easier to read. When you've got to go back and track what's happening, it's easier for you to read, it's easier for the public to be interested in what you are doing. Next slide. I do want to emphasize here that before we start with these particulars, that the minutes that you see from a committee online is the picture of your board. And you want to keep that in mind, because that is how people decide, do they really want to be on this board? Every fall when we do recruitments, we get hundreds of applications for people. And a lot of those people go online and check the minutes of your different boards to find out the type of work that you're doing. So So remember that when you are taking your minutes, you're giving a verbal picture of your board and the work that you do and its importance. The essential information that you have to include in minutes are the date and the time, the participants' names, and that includes those who are present, those who are excused, and those who are absent. And for some committees, the excused and absent can become critical information. And the reason is their bylaws have rules about members being able to not attend a meeting as long as they're excused. And if a member is absent without having been excused, in some committees, it can become an issue. If you have a member who's not attending and you would like to replace that member. So that is why the excused and absent, there's those two different firm steps. You need to include minutes approval from previous meetings. And then the decisions that are made for each item on your agenda. On motions, you need to put the maker and the seconder and the vote. And in your bylaws, you should check to see if that vote requires you to record every single member's vote individually, or if you can just, if it doesn't address that, if you can simply say the motion carried 6-0, or the motion carried 4-1 with Counselor so-and-so voting no. Motions that died for a lack of a second need to be recorded, because if it becomes an issue in the future, you can show that that motion was made and there was no action on the part of the other members to second the motion, because that's an indication they don't wish to take that action. However, there's no need, if a motion is made and then it is withdrawn, there's no need to record that because it's no longer an active issue before your board. Actions taken by consensus are also not a formal motion, but they are an action. Sometimes your board will just say, oh, do we need to vote on that? And no, we all agree, and then you indicate that it was taken by consensus. The thing with consensus is, there may be times when it is the consensus of your board majority to take that action, and you have a minority that does not support it. And then in your minutes, you would indicate that it was the consensus of the majority board members to whatever.
Cathy?
Any directions or assignments that are given to your members or residents, that should be recorded, and any next steps that you're going to take, because that's your timeline for your project, what's happening. Any items that are held over, you would need to note that. That includes also any items that you might consider part of it. You might consider part of the action and you decide to carry it over to the next meeting for additional information, you would note that. And then some committees have the ability to bring up new business that is not on the agenda. And you would record that also. And then if it's applicable in your meeting bylaws, you would note the next meeting date and time. Often when it says that in bylaws, it says, and the date of the next meeting and time will be announced at the meeting. And so you put that into your minutes. Next slide.
Really quick, Cathy, it looks like Sharon has a question. Sharon, do you want to ask your question?
Cathy, up where it says decisions made by each agenda and then you're making your motion, if I remember Robert's rules, it's the maker, the seconder, and in between second and vote is discussion?
Yes.
How do you then capture the discussion between the second and the vote?
What I do is I note that on there that the motion was made and seconded and discussion ensued. So you've got your motion and that's there. and as a simple 2-word sentence, discussion ensued, and then you record your discussion. And then when they reach the end of discussion and your chair calls for a vote, I put vote on motion, and then reflect the motion, or the vote on the motion. Now, you also need to be aware that a motion can happen, there's discussion, and a member makes an amendment to the motion. So then you've got a motion in there that you've got to show. It's a motion to amend the main motion, and you show what that is, and there's more discussion. Take the vote on the amendment first.
Right.
And then your chair will determine on the results of that what happens, if you go next or not. And then you finish your discussion on your main motion and your vote on the main motion. So that is the right of any board member to amend it. And sometimes it can get a little sticky, but you need to just follow that path and keep the amendment and it's the vote on the amendment together in that before you take your final vote on your motion.
So the friendly amendment, then the motion, vote on one, then the other. Okay. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Just a little thing I want to add. Officially, there is no such thing as a friendly amendment. Parliamentarians go nuts when they hear that phrase. I mean, it's an amendment.
Okay.
That's just how it is.
I just remember learning that a very long time ago, and it hasn't fallen out of my vocabulary.
You and millions of other people too,
Yeah.
It's the way it is.
Okay. Thanks. Sorry.
Next line. One of the things I always like to encourage is pre-plan for your meeting because it's going to make your life a lot simpler. If you meet with your chair, first of all, most important is to ensure that the format you're using for your agendas works for you taking minutes. And the reason I say that is because sometimes formats are not really designed so that you can easily just pull it up on a Word document and start taking notes right off of it and follow what's happening. So if you have an agenda that's kind of troublesome in that method, then get with your chair and start designing something that's simple and clear that you can follow. And my example that I've given in the past for that is that sometimes on an agenda, an item is listed and you've got 3 options to discuss or 3 areas that you want to discuss under this main option, but they're not listed on the agenda. And it's a whole lot easier if they would be listed because then you can keep track individually when they go to talk about your project for the summer picnic. And first you want to discuss the location, put location, and it's easy to say right there then. You don't have to go in there and kind of track through yourself. And then they want to discuss, say, the cost. And when they switch to next item, cost, it's already there. You just pick it up. It's a basic outline form that can make your life a whole lot easier if you've got those main categories already set up so that you can set your template up right from your agenda. Always confirm that all the business items are on an agenda. The day of the meeting, call your chair, or if it's a staff liaison, call your liaison and confirm that nothing has changed on the agenda so that you're not surprised at the meeting. It's not often that items are removed, but it's quite often that items can be added. And it's a whole lot better if you're not surprised about that. And then always ask if a final decision is wanted or a motion is going to be made at that meeting so that you're prepared for it when it comes. Check to see if anything extra, if you're going to need anything extra for the meeting. And by that, I mean your main supplies, everything is working, you've got your reports in front of you, and you're all set to go. By doing all of that, you end up with a template that lets you make, that I call kind of a skeleton of a meeting, which is a skeleton to your minutes. If you have that set and go, it's just easy to pop from item to item in taking your minutes and taking your notes. Next slide.
Really quick, Sharon, do you have another question, or is your, okay. Just wanted to double check and make sure there wasn't anything else.
These are my tips for taking notes. I find it's very easy to follow the template as I was just speaking it and create it from the agenda. And then you can use a modified template that way to do your minutes. And that way, what is on your agenda will match the format of what's on your minutes. And it's very easy to trace then. I have always used macros, which are standard phrases that are used over and over again for every format, you know, like your roll calls. There are different ways of doing that now. I understand macro. I was told years ago, macros, nobody uses them anymore. But whatever you use in your own world in terms of all of those phrases that you don't have to retype. Like the reason I use roll call and the call to order is because if I hit that macro button and then all I have to do is put in the date and the time of the meeting instead of the whole Mayor Doyle called the meeting to order, blah, 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 blah. Those kinds of uses of those macros save an awful lot of time. And at the end of this slides, you will see some of the common ones that I use in my city recorder world, but it gives you examples of ideas you can think of for saving yourself work. Do not try to capture everything that is being said at a meeting. First of all, like I said earlier, this is not a record of who said what. And you'll never be able to keep up with it. You'll be so frustrated. What is important is listen and to capture the main discussion, the decisions and the actions as they occur. And if you need something repeated, ask for it to be repeated. Ask your chair if they can repeat the motion or if they can clarify the point that was made. Or if after a long discussion, you kind of have lost, it's easy to lose track of the directions being given. You ask that they be summarized to be clearly kept for the record. Now, we record our meetings and we use that recording to prepare our final minutes. It often comes in handy. And Oregon Records Law does allow you to record a meeting. And then that helps you go back and prepare or listen again on anything. This is kind of a lot of information so far. Is there any questions or anything at all? Okay, let's go to the next slide. Oh.
I also just wanted to jump in and note that because we are recording our virtual meetings at the moment, that was not something that I had when I was a recorder for BCCI, but you do have the luxury of having your meetings recorded on video that you can reference back to if needed. So hopefully that is helpful for you all as you go through that. Spencer, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks. As we're recording all our meetings, why is it necessary to take minutes at all?
That is a really great question. And that is required by the governor. So even though, the recording of the virtual meetings is just is because of the pandemic. It's part of the state of emergency legislation that happened during the special session last year. But minutes are still the official record of the meeting. So, and also because minutes can be easily archived forever. But archiving videos, 2-hour-long videos, takes up a significant amount of data storage capacity. It's not quite as nimble in terms of being able to distribute. So yeah, so the meetings are recorded, but in terms of public meetings law, the minutes are still the official record of the meeting, and that will forever be the case. So. Sorry that if it feels like double duty, but hopefully Cathy has shown you how to make it super easy, super simple, cut to the chase, So anyway, you wouldn't be the first person to ask that question, and you certainly won't be the last person to ask that question.
And also in our Beaverton City Code, it's required that all minutes be in written form. And then the law says, and just as Francisca explained, we don't have the capabilities to hang on to recording technology forever. If you only recorded the meetings themselves, those recordings have to last forever. And cities just can't do that now. Counties can't do it. It's impossible. So the written word, however, you are allowed to record the meetings. You are allowed to record, and then the law is that you have to keep that recording for 1 year after the date the minutes are approved. So, especially for committees like HOAs, like school PTA meetings and stuff like that. They often like to record their meetings for the same reasons we do, but then you don't want to have to be responsible for that forever. So, so the state says, okay, you don't have to be responsible for it forever, but you do have to be responsible for it for a year. So whoever your minute taker is and is using their dictaphone, they need to keep that record, and they can. If it were the cities, you could turn it over to the city. If it's for your own group, separate group, then you can keep it within your group. Okay, next slide.
Just really quick, I saw that Daniel had his hand up. I just wanted to check and make sure. Did you get your question answered?
No, I realized it was a question specific to the BDA, so I'll ask about
Okay.
one of our bylaws, I assume.
Yeah. Okay, great. All right, we'll move on to the next slide.
Okay, I always recommend that do the minutes as soon as possible after the meeting as you can, while it's fresh in your mind. And as you review your notes, if you have any questions, you can ask staff, or you can ask your chair to clarify them. Most of all, be objective. We don't use minutes for soapboxes. We don't do adverbs that are like that stress something like very high cost. We just say it was high cost. The hardest thing for people when they're fresh and new to this is that we are to remain totally objective in our picture of what happened at a meeting. Okay. And that's hard to do when you feel really strong about something and they aren't agreeing with your position. But we're there just to record what was happening and to remain objective. And so we like to try and avoid any kind of inflammatory language or any type. Well, I think that's clear. Ask me if you have any more questions on that. I try to write in the same tense throughout, and pick your style that you want for your committee. and stick to it. And avoid any kind of inflammatory or personal observations, because above all else, that really doesn't reflect a good picture of your members. And even though they may have been upset or angry or shouting about something, how you describe it is a picture of what your board is. And so instead of saying he was upset and started using cuss language, you can say Counselor Brown was concerned about such and such, or expressed strong reservations with such and such. It's just trying to keep that objective side, and remember they may be upset, that their viewpoint is valid, just like everyone else's viewpoint is valid. Use positive language to try and give that positive picture of your organization. Now, some of you may have to deal with staff reports or reports that are letters that are written to your boards or committees. You do not need to repeat what is in those letters into your minutes. And the reason is it becomes a record of your meeting already. What you want to do is say this document was, this letter was submitted by so-and-so in opposition to whatever, or in support of, or making a recommendation to, and then identify the letter by date and who it came from. And then it becomes part of your record, and you would keep that. Some committees have kept their correspondence and those kinds of things right with their minutes. Others have a binder for their different meetings. I recommend the binder myself, or folders, because your minutes book and record should be just that, only your minutes, and keep all of those together. The other thing on your minutes too is that if you're in a situation where you have to keep your minutes for a certain period of time, like for us, it's permanent. If we get a letter and it's part of the public record, we put in parentheses, after we've identified the document, we put in the record. And then that way anyone who's reading these minutes knows they just need to go back to the folder for that file, for that meeting, and pull that letter, and they can see what was said in that letter, or they can go back and read the recommendations made by your members or public that attended. Again, focus on action items and not discussion. You want to reflect the decisions that were made. After you've done that, your rough draft minutes, what I always do is I let it set aside for a day or so. And then I go back and I read it one more time, and then I give it to a chair to review. Someone else who looks at it and see if they catch anything else. You will be surprised how in that one day's time, you've given your brain the time to relax and not think about this, have other things on your mind. And when you go back on your second review, it's amazing that there are always things that you remember, oh yeah, that's why that was said. And you can add that and clarify that a bit if needed to your meetings. Next slide. These are the samples of the macros that I have created and that I've used. Now they're out of date. You'll notice there are counselors there that aren't there anymore, but this is an old slide. I haven't updated it, but it's an excellent example. You know, when I use my macro on this, on any of these paragraphs, all I do is hit the F1 key and then the code for that. And the whole thing gets typed out. And there may be similar items that you can use in your own minutes. Next slide. That's another one. The signature lines I find very, very nice to have it because they're already set up in format. You don't need to go reset for each time. And the last slide. This is the one thing I really like to stress, and that is that if your minutes are clear and complete the first time, then the time you spent in that meeting wasn't wasted. The time you spent doing those minutes wasn't wasted, and it avoids having to meet again for the same purpose. I have been on committees where an item that was discussed at the last meeting was not recorded in the minutes, and then we had to go back and discuss again, which is a little bit annoying at times. So if you take care of it the first time around, you don't need to talk about it and do it again at another meeting. That was a very fast going through of some tips and guidelines to help you. There, it's in more detail in information that I've given Francisca to provide if you want it. Are there any questions or anything I didn't cover at all? I'd be glad to listen. And
It looks like
Sharon?
question. I think April had her hand up first, and then Sharon.
Oh, okay.
And then we'll take any more questions. And then also really quick, I'm going to put the link in the chat to the online PDF of our minutes taking handbook. If anybody needs that link again, so that you have that handy. It has all the information that Cathy covered and more.
Yeah, I was going to ask first, can you put that slide up with the macros again? Because I like some of the wording on that, and that would be helpful to me. And then my second question was, when referring to who's making the motion, is there a proper way to address them in the minutes?
Well, usually if it's like a committee member, we will say that. We will say member Smith or member Jones. I've noticed that some committees, though, don't like that much formality. They prefer the more informal, where you just go ahead and say, Jane Smith asked such and such. It's really up to your board to decide a format for your minutes. And I often have strongly supported doing that, designing that format that you want for your committee's minutes. And the reason is, if it's designed the way they want it, if you set up a format, then it kind of, it eliminates the need for anyone who comes in the future for taking minutes. The format is already set. You've inherited this format, and if it works well for your board, it's easy then for them to just learn the format. The other thing I also say is, look at what they're doing every 5 years or so and see if it still fits the technology and works well for you. You may have a great format that worked wonderfully, you know, for 5 or 6 years or so, but now things have changed. And it isn't working so well anymore. So you want to be able to update that too. It's just better than every single time that someone new comes to do the minutes, if they don't have to struggle with how to format the minutes. Common ones that we use in boards, we say board member. City council, of course, we say counselors. Wherever necessary, we say chair, whenever it's the chair that's speaking. But again, it's up to your board really to decide how they want their minutes to look.
Great, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Sharon?
Cathy, I wish I could remember exactly the example to give, so I'm just going to do a general question. How do you deal with amendment or addendums?
Addendums to a staff report or to?
To the minutes. We had, like I said, I can't remember the exact thing, but I went to Miles afterwards, and it was some action that had taken place because of the meeting, but kind of after the meeting, and was, I guess, recorded as an addendum. Can you speak to addendum in a general way?
Okay, generally what happens is that something has come up as a result of an action that was taken at a previous meeting, okay? And your bylaws should address how you do that. If they do not address that, then what I do is that if it's brought up by a board member, there's a section where you can say, I think it's called new members or board discussion. And if not, if you don't have that on agenda, you should have it on an agenda. At least you could call it new business. And you can say board member Jones referred back to the meeting of such and such, or referred back to the item regarding whatever at the meeting of such and such, and then put in what his reference was. If action or discussion occurs, then you need to reflect that, especially if it's a change in the vote, which is where I have run into it most often. And at that point, when it comes up, the one thing I always like to stress is, because a board member requests it does not mean that the board has to act on it at that time. They can choose to have the record checked, to go back and have the record checked if they have a recording of the meeting, or they can choose if they want to consider it. Now, I don't know what your individual bylaws say, but for my council, only a person who voted on the winning side of a motion can bring up the request to reconsider. So this becomes actually part, I've not heard the phrase addendum used in that before. It's in my experience, it has been a motion, a request to reconsider. And cities, handle them differently depending on what their codes, policies, and rules of procedure are. But it would be done at a next meeting, and then the board would consider the request.
So off this line of discussion here, I will dig up what I'm trying to remember and send it to you offline to see if we handled it properly or not. So, but I'll have to dig that up out of the minutes and see how it was framed. So I don't want to take up a lot of time here doing that unless it's of value to other people. So thank you.
That's fine. And I'm pretty sure if Miles is leading you, that he's probably looked into the process, so, but again, if your bylaws don't address it, you might want to talk to staff to see if they should somehow. I mean, parliamentary procedure is also there too. If your bylaws even had a sentence that said that anything dealing with the running of meeting not addressed in these bylaws will be guided by Robert's Rules of Order, you've taken care of that kind of a situation too.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Spencer?
Thank you. Let's see, two questions. One, do you recommend sending out, when I submit minutes to staff and chairs sending it out as a Word document with track changes available. So if they have changes to make, they can just do them and shoot it back. When something is final, do you recommend sending it out as a Word document or a PDF? So if it's a PDF, people can't mess with it. And I've been told not to send emails to my whole commission because if it's 6 or more or something, whatever the bylaws say, that's a quorum, and that complicates life immeasurably. Can you speak to that a little bit, please?
Sure. First of all, on sending out minutes to your staff and chair on track changes, that's an easy way to do it. One of the things I always want to remind people doing minutes is that just because someone suggests a change, unless, how do I put this tactfully? They may not like the way you worded something, but the way you worded something is correct. You do not have to accept their rewording. It's up to you as the preparer of the minutes. And the only time that this has become an issue in my career is that when the way they reworded it actually ended up in not accurately reflecting exactly what happened at the meeting. Because a lot of times if they just want to say, another synonym for the word that you use, that doesn't bother me, that's fine. But you have to be careful sometimes when people who are prolific writers decide to rewrite your whole sentence, and then you concentrate on what they've written, and lo and behold, it's not exactly what happened at the meeting. So don't accept those kinds of changes. You're not required to. I do like track changes an awful lot. The only thing I find a difficulty sometimes is when you've got 7 or 8 people reviewing your document, which luckily in your case, you wouldn't have because you would only be working with your staff and your chair. On Word, on using Words or PDFs on your final approved minutes, they only go in PDF forms. It's in the end, and also if it's critical for some reason, as if you were involved in a legal case and you had to certify that your document was the correct certified copy of your minutes. Again, a PDF of that document is what we would use with the certification on it and an ID tracking number. Yeah, if I don't want something edited, I really don't want to send it in Word because that just opens up the whole world to it. In terms of email to all your committee members, because that makes a quorum, that is absolutely right. It does, and you do not want to be doing that. Oregon meeting laws are very, very firm, and they frown upon meetings that are seen outside of the public purview. So no, you wouldn't want to be email or discussing issues with all of your committee members at once. So if somebody, wants to discuss something with another committee member, then do it, one at a time. Definitely don't do it where you reach your quorum number, because then that is a meeting that is not legal.
Can you do it in pieces then?
Well, the other option.
I'm sorry,
Can I do it?
I didn't catch it.
If 6 is a quorum, can I send it out to 5 people at a time?
No.
What I was going to say.
No, you can't. Really, the reality is, and I always recommend this, is, avoid online email conversations, that type of stuff. It's just, it's too easy to cross the line and think you're okay, because I have seen where people have even said, you know, I saw the mayor talking to Counselor so-and-so at a restaurant, and they were discussing this, and that's an illegal meeting, and and you know, it's just not wise. You know, it's you're nowhere near a quorum, but you know, it's just not a good situation to be in.
Got it. Thank you.
And I was just going to add one more thing. You can always use BCC. So anytime that I email all of y'all, I just blind copy all of the email addresses so that, you know, so that people's email addresses aren't just involuntarily revealed, but also so that nobody can reply all. And that is a really helpful way if you need to get a message out to the board and want to prevent the reply all risk that's attendant with that. Or the other option is to just send the minutes to the staff liaison, and then they can send it out to the board, and they use, you know, the BCC to make sure that there's no reply all. So so I know that it, you know, it can feel kind of tricky with that part of the public meetings law, but at least with that, then you know that you're covered.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions? These have all been really great questions.
Okay, then. I want to thank you all for being here. If any of you have any additional questions, my email, Francisca can give it to you, cjansen@beavertonoregon.gov. If you ever have any questions at all, just go ahead and contact me, and I'll be glad to help. It hopefully will make the task of doing minutes not so cumbersome for you, and I'm always interested in helping out to make it easier. Want to keep you guys interested in working and doing great things out in the community, and not agonizing over preparing a set of minutes.
Thanks a lot, Cathy. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Certainly,
Thank you so much.
certainly.
Thank you.
yeah. I just
Thank
want to again thank Cathy for being here and sharing her wisdom and expertise, her decades of expertise with us tonight, and helping us remember that it can be very simple and easy to take the minutes, even when it seems overwhelming. But I also just want to take a moment to just remind everyone that our effective virtual meetings training is happening on Tuesday, March 30th. So hope that you all can be there. We've got a really wonderful trainer lined up as well, very dynamic and helping us navigate this new reality that we find ourselves in. But again, thank you for being here tonight. It was really great seeing you all, and I hope that you got what you needed out of tonight's training. And if you have any questions at all for me, you know how to contact me. But otherwise, we are 4 minutes early, and please go enjoy your newly sprung forward, very well lit evening.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Francisca.
everybody.
Good night.
Night.
See you guys.
Night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.